Well, great. Well, welcome, everyone. It really is fantastic to have each of you with us on today's web seminar entitled, What's Missing from This Ecosystem? Common Core State Standards Assessments. My name is John Branham, and I'm Grantmakers for Education's Deputy Director. Today's web seminar, however, is brought to you by GFE in partnership with our Education Policy Working Group. GFE's mission is to strengthen philanthropy's capacity to improve education outcomes for all learners, an effort we accomplish by offering impactful place-based and e-based programming, knowledge products such as benchmarking, which provides data and analysis on the latest trends in education philanthropy. GFE's 2012 benchmarking report highlights that 1/4 of our members are making grants to support the Common Core. Given the enactment of new policies such as Common Core state standards, new assessment tools, yesterday's announcement about dramatic Common Core connected changes to come in the SAT, and in general, significant Common Core implementation efforts, we expect funders' Common Core investments will increase. Within GFE, we have 3 funder networks designed to bring together grant makers who fund specific areas of education reform. And as mentioned earlier, today's web seminar is brought to you by our Education Policy Working Group. The working group exists to deepen grant makers' knowledge around the education policy-related strategies grant makers can employ to dramatically improve results for all students. Consistent with this strategy, EPWG develops meaningful opportunities for funders to learn and connect with one another as they explore these strategies and share effective practices with each other. At a time when more education funders than ever are appreciating the value of engaging in education policy, EPWG's efforts are unique and valuable. All GFE members are invited to become a member of the Education Policy Working Group, and if you'd like to do so, please contact GFE's Program and Network Manager, Kimberlyn Butler, at kimberlyn@edfunders.org. So before jumping into our presentation, let me take just a minute to highlight a few of our webinar platform's key elements. Because the lines will be muted, you can easily submit questions throughout the presentation using the Chat with Presenter dialog box in the left panel of your screen. Kimberlyn will be fielding questions for speakers. You may also raise your hand if you'd like the moderator to chat directly with you regarding a particular question. Finally, for a better viewing experience, please feel free to select full screen in the top right corner of the page. If at any time during the webinar you have logistical challenges, please dial 1-800-246-1442 and provide the access code of 595-2100 for immediate assistance. This phone number and access code can also be found in your invitation. At the end of today's presentation, the full webinar and audio file will be available for you on an MP4 file. We will also post slides and a recording of the webinar on GFE's website. So let me also just take a minute to thank today's presenters, including AJ Jones of Achieve and Jacqueline King of Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. Thanks to all of you, too, for joining us. And let me turn the virtual baton over to Sherry Readiness, our moderator. Sherry?
Hi, thanks, John. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today for What's Missing from This Ecosystem, Common Core State Standards and Assessment. We're going to start off with a polling question, so we're going to test our platform a little bit. I'd love it if participants could respond yes or no to this real-time poll question, and which actually will evoke what one of the screens that John just showed us. Are you currently investing in the Common Core in some fashion or not? That's the question on the table, and I'm asking Kimberlyn, who's driving us, to be able to set it up so that people can respond to that poll. Right now I see a screen of my face, but not the poll itself.
Absolutely. We're inserting that right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Kimberlyn. If you remember from the slide that just flashed past us, about 24% of GFE members who responded to a recent survey suggested that they are already investing in Common Core. About 17 or 18% suggested that they might be interested in doing so. So it's less than 50% at this point, at least in this latest survey. So we're kind of curious about this particular audience and how hands-on you already are. So if you would just click on the yes or the no, and as I understand from the magic of this software program and Kimberlyn's expertise, we'll be able to see what portion of our audience is already engaged and which is thinking about it or about to.
Yes, and it looks like 100% of funders are on this call funding and investing in the Common Core.
That is quite extraordinary, isn't that? So perhaps, I think then the later portion of this webinar is going to hopefully be of deep use to you, as you'll have an opportunity to engage with Jackie King and A.J. Jones about the work that the two assessment consortia are doing. That means we've got a lot of expertise here. And I'll keep my comments relatively brief and high level then for that same purpose, acknowledging the work that you're already doing. This webinar stems from a session that the Hewlett Foundation and Lumina Foundation, along with our consulting company, Education First, did for GFE's last annual meeting in Brooklyn last fall in 2012. The purpose of that webinar and the purpose of that session and this webinar were to try to first provide information about how Lumina and Hewlett had parsed and thought through the tactical approach to Common Core and its investments in Common Core over a 2-year period, and also to try to encourage other funders to see themselves in this landscape, in this ecosystem, if you will, and where they might be able to engage and with which constituency they might be able to engage, and also to provide some updates about what the policy context is, and that is that last portion, I think, is probably of primary interest to all of you. So I'll make this very, very short. One technique that we use to think about our engagement levels with Common Core has been a mapping of a timeline, if you will, of the various activities on the ground by the assessment consortium in particular, but also on the part of state adoption. And to think about this, as you can see from this first timeline, segment of the timeline, this is a three-part slide because the timeline is actually quite large, running through 2015. We try to capture what the key issue areas are in each school year. Along the timeline, you see the specifications about what PARC and Smarter Balanced are doing along this timeline. And then the part that I want to highlight for you all on each portion of this timeline, the pain points, meaning the issue areas that are arising and are becoming dilemmas or barriers for state implementation in particular, and in terms of the public and media understanding and discourse around Common Core as well. So you'll notice that our projected pain points that we think are already there, but will perhaps peak and will certainly be apparent more than ever by this summer, are that teachers are going to be worrying more about the instructional delivery of standards than ever before and how challenged or unprepared they feel about that. If anyone saw a headline, by the way, we prepared this timeline a number of months ago, but if you saw this morning's or last night's Ed Week Common Core special pullout, that was the headline of one of their articles. District administrators realized that the accountability systems will have to be overhauled because they were not going to meet their accountability measures even before the new tests come into play. So those are two pain points that raise issues, that raise communications challenges, that raise, in particular, information opportunities in this first year. Let's look at the second slide that takes us in 13 through 14, if you would, Kimberlyn. Here we go. So here's school year 2013-14, where you see full-scale readiness for full-scale field testing taking place in part of both assessment consortia, where you see a series of college readiness tools being rolled out as well on the part of PARC, at least that is what PARC has declared. And you see additional pain points, this point again, once again, around the side of teachers, where the education and evaluation and compensation implications for performance, in other words, are going to come to the fore, and where state departments of education will also actually, if they haven't already been scared to death, but will continue to be much more challenged by the notion of technology readiness for the implementation of these exams. By the way, these pain points are ongoing. We were just projecting a peak, you can see in this one. Let's flip to 14-15. 2014-15, this is the run-up to the full-scale implementation of the assessments in states that are part of this, and the full-blown implementation of Common Core state standards hitting hitting right after, if you'll notice, a very important election year in November 2014, when a very large amount of governors are going to be up for either new election or re-election. And as you know, as we remember from the last round of elections, governors and the consequent influence on their chiefs of K-12 and their superintendents of higher education, or governor SHIOs, basically their chief executive officers of education, is profound. And so that's one of those really sort of apocryphal moments that we're going to have to pay attention to. Then we also have a larger play out of all the different pain points, reiterating basically these concerns and worries we have now and will continue to have, that may peak right around the time that public awareness is very, very high about the presence of these Common Core state standards and assessments. All right, so I wanted to show you guys this timeline as a means of trying to track reform implementation and thinking about the consequences and how investment could flow alongside of it. When Hewlett and Lumina thought about what we could do in this space, we both determined that one of our highest priorities was to engage higher education and K-12 together in the pursuit of this implementation scenario. We felt it very, very important to have higher education at the table, and we thought about it in three different distinct buckets of investment. The first was money and resources directly to the two assessment consortia, actually, PARC and Smarter Balanced, so that they would have dedicated personnel who would think about, manage, and engage higher education in their respective states. And Jackie and AJ are the personification of that investment. They are that investment. The second round of investment was investment directly in states through intermediaries, but also directly to states. And that was money that was premised on the idea that states would have a lot to do, and the work, especially the K-12 higher education alignment work, engagement work, inside higher ed and as well as K-12 and together with higher ed, both elements of that. Lots of responsibility, lots of activity, lots of connecting the dots, and that some person or some part of the education agencies would have to be owning this and engaged in it. So we were able, with the support of Hewlett, Gates Foundation, Carnegie Corporation, join together and put together a pool of funds to support 12 states directly to be able to get staff and resources to work on the higher ed K-12 element of Common Core information sharing and then work plan development and implementation. And then we also had several groups of intermediaries. One cluster was ASCU, SHIO, and CCSSO. Another was NGA, NASH, and EDI. If these little letters don't mean anything to you, that's okay. We can go back later and talk more about them. But those associations and organizations raised their hand and said that they would want to collaborate to help states create implementation plans and prepare and make sure that the segments of the higher education community and the K-12 community were working together on thinking through the implications, the policy changes, the regulatory implications, et cetera, of Common Core. And the third bucket of work we did was around research and communications efforts. And that, I might add, has been, that was a more traditional set of investments to organizations like EdWeek, to organizations like Brookings Institution and others, who were able to do research, commentary, and sort of keep the drumbeat going around the importance of K-12 higher education collaboration around Common Core. So that was our theory of change, our theory of investment. One thing I might add that has been particularly interesting in the past 2 years is the amount of attention and need required to pay attention to the communications angle of all of this work. And in that regard, it's very important, and GFE has been a very important partner in putting together a coalition of funders who have created something called the Common Core Collaboration Collaborative, CCCC. CCCC is currently not completely up and running, but is in its final planning stages. We're reaching out, or will we be reaching out to the wider grant-making community to see if we could get more partners and more folks interested in the CCCC. It's premised on the idea that a lot of communications materials are created around the country by states, by different organizations and entities for a variety of different purposes, and there needs to be one location where states can go to consult the output, the creations of other states, so in a sense an archive or a common platform where all these materials are available, so no one has to recreate the wheel, so folks can borrow and steal good ideas from each other on the communications front. It's also meant to have the capacity to respond to states as needed when a flare-up occurs where there's a communications entanglement appearing on the horizon, or actually some sort of short-term fire that has to be put out in terms of media coverage. This CCCC is supposed to be available to turn to with, once again, template language, experts who could be called in to testify if needed, and other kinds of communications resources. We're excited about the CCCC, and watch out for more information about that, I think. So, with that.
Sherry, thank you so much. It looks like we've got a question here from Scott Thompson, and he wants to know, why the increasing pressure to abandon reform?
Meaning, why do we think that certain states are backing away from reform, including my home state of Indiana? I think in Indiana this is actually more of a question of crosswinds that we have always anticipated. That there are always going to be folks who are going to push back from any kind of major change in an education system, and any change that evokes assessment, which is immediately labeled as standardized testing and then used as a kind of a straw man against change, always has a great amount of media play and back and forth. But when push comes to shove, what really is at question here is whether or not our country and our individual states have the tolerance for thinking about, in clearer, more transparent ways, about what an educated American looks like as they depart high school, as they depart mandatory education, and what higher education expects of those students to be able to do the work at the proper level. And it represents a tremendous and important, a momentous really, move in that direction, which we are deeply supportive of. And so I think it's a matter of information sharing. It's a matter of clarifying what's at stake. There will be crosswinds. There will be states that may actually drop off, particularly when elections move political leaders in different directions. But I think this is one of those places where we can stay the course with the majority of our states and move ahead. But with that, I want to introduce, actually, Jackie King, who is Director of Higher Ed Collaboration at the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. And Jackie will give us an update about what's happening right now on the Smarter Balanced front with the Smarter Balanced states, development of the assessments. And she and AJ together are quite a resource when it comes to thinking about what the zeitgeist is right now among adopters. I might add, Kimberlyn, just FYI, I've been kicked off the internet. We're having some difficulties here in Indianapolis, so I'll be looking at our backup PowerPoint.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm addressing you from the East Coast, where so far the internet connections are good, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. I'm pleased to be with you this afternoon. I want to just note up front, we were really tasked with talking to you about the role for philanthropy in this work with Common Core and higher education. That said, I understand that from the poll that many of you are funding Common Core initiatives right now, and you may have particular questions about where the assessment consortia are in terms of the development of assessments and the like. So I'm happy to field those as well. So don't despair. If you've got questions like that and you're not seeing them answered in my slides, please type them into the chat window and we'll make sure that we address them. So in terms of the topics planned to cover in the brief time we have with you this afternoon, I want to talk a little bit about the challenges and barriers to higher education implementation of Common Core that I see from my perch working with higher education officials in our 21 member states, 21 governing states and 3 advisory states. What I think the major to-do list is for higher education with regard to Common Core, and how the philanthropic community really can be a catalyst for action. So, going to some of these challenges and barriers, Sherry already alluded to some of the political challenges. In many states, the SHEO, the Chief Higher Education Officer, and the Chief State School Officer, sometimes those relationships are fantastic. Sometimes they're not as fantastic. And so that sometimes can be a challenge. We have had a lot of governors already turn over since the Common Core was adopted, and as Sherry has noted, we've got another big election coming up in 2014. We have seen some organized political opposition to the Common Core in some states. And we are also starting to talk about what some people have called the score cliff. Everything is a cliff these days. When scores come out, and in many states the percentage of students who are deemed to have met standards because of the increased rigor of the Common Core and the increased rigor of the assessments, in many states we're going to see a big drop-off in the percentage of students who are deemed to have met standard, and that, if not properly managed, could create its own set of political challenges. There are some real challenges with regard to policy development. Some states are far along in thinking about setting common placement standards and developing transition courses working with K-16, but other states are really just beginning to think about this kind of work. Some states have great infrastructure to support cross-institution collaboration and collaboration between higher ed and K-12. Other states do not and are really having to put that infrastructure in place due to the implementation demands of Common Core. As Sherry has noted, communication is always a challenge. In particular, for this work, making sure that faculty in the arts and sciences, education school faculty, this is their bread and butter, and they think about things like Common Core a lot. But really driving down to the faculty in the math and English and biology and history departments who may not spend a lot of their time thinking about what's happening in K-12 and need a little help to understand the relevance for the courses that they teach. In some states, we really need to reset the relationship between K-12 and higher education. It's been polite, there are meetings, people share updates, but there really hasn't been the kind of deep collaboration that's necessary to implement the Common Core. And so the standards and assessments really are acting as a catalyst to sort of push those relationships forward to the next level, which is something that I've heard from our membership is a big benefit of Common Core. K-16, it takes K-16 from a nice thing to do to an essential thing to do, and we can talk some more about that. Obviously, big implications for teacher and school leader professional preparation and professional development. Sometimes the wheels of higher education grind slowly. You'd think that education colleges would be sort of leading the pack on all of this, and in some places they are, but in some places the movement to adjust curricula has not been as fast as we would like, given that teachers today are teaching in many districts to the Common Core state standards, and they may not be getting the kind of support to do that they need from colleges of education. There's also just initiative fatigue. This work in Common Core is really part and parcel of the broader agenda around student success, around completion, around improving learning outcomes for students. But with all the initiatives that have been out there from Achieving the Dream and Complete College America and Learning in America's Promise, so many different initiatives. On some campuses, I think initiative fatigue has set in, and so there's a real challenge to just sort of, one, show people that this isn't yet another new initiative. It's another way to advance the goals that colleges and universities already have, but also just to re-energize folks and get them excited about this work. And finally, among some faculty, there's real skepticism about the capacity for reform in K-12. And, is this just another K-12 fad? Is this something that, will be the hot topic for a couple of years but will fade? And trying to help faculty get past the skepticism. This has been adopted by 46 states. It really is a game changer. But for some faculty, it's taken a while to convince them that that's the case. Won't belabor these because in the same way that I've talked about the challenges, the flip side of that is the agenda. Communication we've talked about building relationships, and those relationships really have to go from the SHIO and the chief all the way down to high school teachers collaborating with college faculty. And I would say one of the most rewarding elements for me of this work has been to watch relationships develop when we've been able to bring K-12 and higher education teachers together. Very quickly, any kind of silos fall away, and you just see them united in their love of their discipline and in their interest in helping students learn. So when we do it, when we bring these people together, magic really can happen. And you see the rest of the agenda there, the coming together around what it means to be college ready, and coordinating placement policies, creating supports for underprepared students. The real promise of the Common Core is what it can do for students who aren't on track to being ready for college, and how those students can be identified early and assisted with getting the support that they need so that they leave high school ready and don't have to spend time in developmental courses when they get to college. And we've talked about teacher and school leader preparation. So how can the philanthropic community help? In so many ways. Borrowing from the environmental movement, this is really a chance to think globally but act locally. Common Core gives us that national framework, but it can only work through implementation. So for foundations on the line that work locally or regionally, there's just a huge amount to be done to support implementation on the ground in the communities where you work. The bully pulpit is important, letting higher education know that that this is something that matters to you and that you're interested in funding it has a lot of impact. In your funding, prioritizing efforts that bring together K-12 and higher ed, you can be a real catalyst to break down those silos. And one of the things I hear from some of my higher ed colleagues, there's been so many budget cuts, and state higher ed agencies are very lean these days, and they say, we know there probably are philanthropic resources out there, but we don't have time to go get the money. We need resources so we can go out and get resources. So to the extent that you can provide planning grants or other means so that colleges and universities can kind of get a foot in the door with this, and then ramp up to full-scale grant writing, because that's something that I've encountered on a couple of occasions where they were just so overwhelmed with the day-to-day work that they couldn't figure out how they would pull together the resources to do a large, complicated grant proposal. The convening power is also really, really valuable. When you all call a meeting, people show up. And so to the extent that you can use your convening power to bring higher ed and K-12 together, that will be really, really valuable. As Sherry described, the national philanthropies engaging in communication efforts to help build political will, there's a lot of that that also can be done at the local and regional level. We're going to need a lot of constituencies supporting this in the business community, as well as in higher ed and K-12 and among local political leaders. There's a lot of work to be done there. And then I guess the last thing I would end with is really try to think about and investigate what the needs are in your local states and regions. Some states are quite far advanced in this work. Other states are just starting. Some states really need to push farther on teacher prep. In other states, they really need to push on setting common placement policies. Every state is different and has somewhat different needs. And as we all know, the structure of higher ed varies so much. In some states, a lot of things can be done through a statewide board of regents. Other states, decisions about implementing Common Core are going to be made on a campus-by-campus basis, because that's the way the governance structure works. So being sensitive to those local, diverse local needs and listening to what those needs are, I think will be enormously valuable. So with that, I want to stop. I will just note that here is the Smarter Balanced website and my contact information if open for questions, but also if questions come up in the days and weeks following this webinar, there's how you can reach me.
Oh, Jackie, thank you so very much. In fact, we have a few minutes right now for questions for Jackie, and here I'm going to ask Kimberlyn to drive again since I've been kicked offline.
Okay, great. At this time, we are opening the chat boxes for you to ask any questions that you might have. And our colleague Dolores Healy has a question around giving some examples, Jackie, of, you alluded to that last point, listening to the needs in your state and region, and we wanted to know, what are some needs that you anticipate in states across the country?
So they really are diverse. So just to give you an example, Michigan does not have any kind of statewide higher education governance. There is a council of presidents, a voluntary council of the four-year college presidents, and there's an association of the community colleges. So I could imagine if we were to get my Michigan representatives on the phone, they might say something about, well, we just need to be able to convene people because we don't have the mechanisms to convene people from across our campuses. South Dakota, another example, South Dakota is a Board of Regents state. They can do a lot of things. They can make a lot of decisions centrally in South Dakota. They received a grant recently from the Bush Foundation to help them with communications because that was the issue that they saw as being most pertinent for them. So the states are definitely in different places in terms of what their particular needs are. I was just on the phone with some folks from California. They want to experiment with a lot of different pathways, thinking about different kinds of students and different kinds of curricular pathways. So that might be an area that they'd want some, I don't know, but I'm just putting out examples. That might be an area that they'd want to explore. So hopefully that provides a sense of sort of the diversity that's out there.
Okay, at this time there are no more questions, so Sherry, we'll turn it back over to you to introduce AJ.
So I'm delighted to introduce our colleague AJ Jones from Achieve. AJ's title is Vice President of Postsecondary Collaboration at Achieve, and he's over the past year and a half, or actually I think it's coming up on 2 years, has been out on the road herding the cats that are higher education and K-12 in parks member states. With that, I'll turn it over to AJ.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I think I can, for sure, AJ. I hope everybody else can.
Okay, wanted to be sure here. Well, first of all, a very good morning and afternoon, depending on which part of the country you find yourselves in. And actually, I've been doing this now I'm actually in my third year, Sherry.
I can't hardly believe it. That's amazing.
And what I want to do is to express a real note of appreciation to the Lumina Foundation, who has, in fact, as a foundation, invested in PARC to engage the higher education community in our 22 PARC states, 19 governing board, and 3 participating states. It's due to the funding of Lumina that I've actually been able to reach out to our 22 states and visited every single one and help develop an infrastructure and a line of communication from the top, meaning the presidents, the commissioners, down to the faculty in the classroom, which is particularly important. And this is very, very important to us. In terms of framing the discussion for this morning, I'm going to cover very briefly, kind of as a refresher, why the Common Core assessment, the assessment for change, the areas of interest for state leaders, which actually leads us to identify some of the opportunities for partnership between the philanthropic community and the states. And from these opportunities, you can infer the areas of the challenges that some of us and some states are facing. And then we'll talk about some of the resource issues. The first is really to talk about why we're doing this. And in a nutshell, what students are typically expected to know at the end of high school is defined by the existing state standards and required by the various curriculum and assessments really does not represent the knowledge and skills that post-secondary education and employers have indicated are successful or needing our skills to be successful in those first-year credit-bearing entry-level courses. And the result is, in many of our states, the students are earning a high school diploma without the skills necessary for success in college and careers. And this results in significantly high remediation rates. This is a real problem, and so I wanted to kind of just remind us about this. Secondly, what this allows us to do is to then identify information about the preparation of our incoming students. If students are advised at some point because of the assessment system that they're on track or not on track to be ready for college, and this will happen typically, the assessments of college readiness, college and career readiness will occur in and about for the PARC at the end of Algebra 2 and at the end of 11th grade English. At Algebra 2, in fact, might be offered in some school districts across the states as early as 10th grade. So there will be students that will be getting some type of report whether they're on track. But regardless of when this occurs, it's going to provide better information about the preparation of incoming students. And this will lead, we hope, to better use of the 12th grade. I think most of you are familiar that across the country, the 12th grade is not used nearly as effectively as it could be. And I'll talk about some of the opportunities, what we can do in 12th grade and the role of the philanthropic foundations. Well, with the improved preparation of our incoming students from all states, both PARC and Smarter Balanced, we're going to find that there's the opportunity to increase the academic rigor in those entry-level credit-bearing courses. Over time, the academic rigor of those entry-level credit-bearing courses in English language, arts, literacy, and mathematics may have decayed somewhat. And as students present themselves more fully knowledgeable and certainly more knowledgeable in those areas of mathematics and English language arts that they're going to receive from the full immersion into the Common Core state standards, it's going to present a challenge and an opportunity for faculty of those first-year courses to increase the academic rigor. Now, this will overall reduce the remediation rates. One thing all of you should ask when you're talking with any institution or state is, what is their definition of remediation? There is no common definition of remediation across the 47 states that have adopted the Common Core state standards. On the basis of the ACT, college readiness may be assessed at a 16 up to a 22 on the ACT, or in my own former state, a 23, 24 in California. And on the College Board, the SAT college readiness can range anywhere from a 400 to a 600. So the general public, teachers included, as well as families and students, are very confused about what is it that I need to know in order to be successful in those entry-level credit-bearing courses. And this is an opportunity, in fact, to do that very thing. The reduced remediation rates then, as we reduce the remediation rates, it's going to, again, depending on the state and the college and the university, it's going to provide an opportunity for funding that has been allocated to support remediation to possibly be redirected to support the general baccalaureate level program or credit-bearing courses. Most colleges and universities that offer remediation, and there are some exceptions across the country, have not received a separate allocation from their state, but have had to carve out the funds from their general operating and to divert funds from the support of the baccalaureate program into remediation. Well, better information, improved preparation, reduction in the number of students who need remediation is going to increase the time to degree, reduce the time to degree, and increase significantly the degree attainment rates. And this increased capacity means of the graduation rate is going to enable colleges and universities at the front end. This is an enrollment management issue that many people forget, that is going to permit colleges and universities to admit more students at the front end. In other words, the more prepared students that come in as first-time freshmen, and as we reduce their time to degree and graduate them, it will open up capacity at the front end, and this will directly affect states who are unable right now to provide access to all fully eligible students at four-year institutions. And for those two-year colleges or community colleges that have open admission, while students are allowed to walk onto class or onto campus, many of those students, as you know, cannot get classes because there are insufficient numbers of sections. This will improve the opportunity for students to do this. And then lastly, it's going to provide a better opportunity for intervention. And this is something I'm going to be talking about in just a moment. If we look at the next, what's the Common Core standards? Just a very quick, again, what the state leaders are going to encounter, they're going to encounter the following changes. And that is they're going to understand better where the students are in that academic learning continuum prior to graduation. And it's going to allow them to have more information about the students, about the ability of teachers to teach. There are two aspects of the assessment. There's the formative, which is in the first part of the fall term, essentially, that's going to provide information back to the teacher as well as to the student. For the teacher, it's going to give them an indication in the PARCC assessment of how well that they're teaching, how well are students learning. But more importantly, the assessments in the early part of the academic year at each grade level is going to provide information to students about where they're the strongest and where they need some additional support and work. And this is an area in which higher education is looking to partner with K-12 to provide a series of interventions, whether it be a student mentoring program or a core of students coming in and supporting students in the classroom with the teacher, after school, in the evenings, and the weekends. This is an important opportunity for them. The local and state education officials then will be able to assess the current in-house capacity to meet the needs of those increased student supports. That is, what is it that they need to do if they're going to expand opportunities for students? But it gives us an opportunity to really partner in new ways between K-12 and higher education in ways that have not been available to us before. So what are the areas of interest for state leaders? We've actually did an assessment in the last month again, and of course conversations throughout the last 2 years. But in the last month, I went to our higher education leadership team members and others in the states and said, what are the areas of the challenges? What are the areas that you need in the state in order to be successful in the implementation of the PARCC assessment and into the acceptance and use of the PARCC college-ready assessments? And these are areas that the state post-secondary leaders have identified as high need. What they need is an opportunity to support the state realignment initiatives and teacher preparation programs and to align it with the Common Core state standards. I will tell you that every chief of every state in PARCC has clearly articulated the need for higher education to become engaged actively in the teacher preparation, not only of in-service, but also pre-service. That is how we train teachers. And then also, what do you do with the teachers in the classroom that are going to start teaching this curriculum in the fall of 14? And this is particularly important that we do this. And this is the area of support for universities. The problem with the PARCC and Smarter Balanced grant from the federal government as part of the Race to the Top, neither consortia was funded to address the whole issue in and around teacher preparation. So put that and park that on an area of some support from philanthropy or philanthropic institutions, and you'll see we're starting to build a picture here. There's the next to support and promote the need for continuing collaboration between K-12 and post-secondary education systems. This again gets into the area of communication. I think we've done a very good job in part, again thanks to the Lumina Foundation in support of developing an infrastructure in each of our 22 states that enables the Commissioner of Higher Education or the Superintendent of Public Instruction of our states to be able to have a communication line to the faculty in the classroom. But the ability to convene, Jackie referenced this earlier, states and higher education are hard-pressed for financial support to bring together members of their higher education community into meetings. And this is a particular obstacle that we're finding and a challenge, and one that needs to be developed. The other area of interest for state leaders is the support for infrastructures. That is in the initial transition to the new career and college ready assessments and sustaining that implementation. What do you do after 14-15? So there's a lot of interest of our state leaders there. And then lastly, on this page at least, before we move to the next one, is supporting mechanisms and programs and initiatives that would encourage support for the educator in the development and implementation of a national education policy reform goals. There's much that will flow from this, and this is just the beginning opportunity for us to do this. Continuing with the areas of interest for state leaders is the support by post-secondary education to update the remediation delivery methodologies to accelerate the placement into entry-level credit-bearing courses. In other words, we're helping through PARP in conversations with our post-secondary communication. For those students who are not on track to be ready for college and who are going to need remediation, are there new models of delivering that instruction? That is, can we have remediation modules instead of full semester or full-year remedial courses? Can there be intervention during high school senior year? Can there be pre-college summer programs, special sections of credit-bearing courses? And rather than the age-old, let's place the student in. Well, to provide an opportunity to explore these options, there's an opportunity here for some additional support for states to bring together the key policy thinkers, reform thinkers, to find new ways to move forward in this environment. One of the key areas of concern, again, of our higher education community has been the messaging to students and their families about the importance of taking the assessments and what this means to them and what it means in terms of shortening their time to degree. Communication is a critical aspect of this, the needs that have been identified by our post-secondary state leaders as an area that needs more attention. We've been focused on the last 2.5 years since the inception of the grant, and I began in October of 2010 to really get the information out into the colleges and universities, because the ultimate goal is to secure the support of the faculty for the acceptance and use of the PARP College Ready Assessment. The other is to support the use of the bully pulpit in speeches through convenings, press releases, etc. And this is an area in which the foundations can provide a great deal of support in their own presentations. I know Jamie Marasotis, for instance, for Lumina, takes every opportunity in his presentations and speeches and convenings to mention the importance of the Common Core State Standards, the importance of the assessments, the importance actually for students in achieving that national goal in which more students are prepared academically upon graduation from high school to decide what course they want to take, whether to move into the workforce or to have some post-secondary education, and then to move into that post-secondary education and increase the number of graduates rather significantly in the next few years. The technological infrastructure to ensure the students can take the exam have been identified, again, as an area of interest for state leaders. Many states have noted that they will need significant assistance to meet the technical specifications that are going to be required to deliver the PARC assessment. One state, for an example, is facing over 50% of the districts needing the pencil and paper waiver in the first year or two. That is, they don't have the computer infrastructure. And for those of you that may not be familiar, both the Smarter Balanced and the PARC exams are designed to be administered online, so that the teachers in the classrooms will have the results within about 2 weeks. Well, this requires extensive development in many of our states for that infrastructure to support the ability of students to take the assessment online. So there is a need, rather, a K-12 need, rather than a post-secondary education need, to have some support to build that infrastructure that's going to bridge or eliminate the digital divide before the post-secondary education, we'll begin to see our K-12 students completing the PARCC assessment in a computer-delivered format. Just another indication or example is that another state has noted that the technological needs are really a key area of concern. And in fact, for many of their districts, specifically those that are remote or rural, there's insufficient technology infrastructure in place to support the administration of an assessment. So we need to attend to that. There's the support for the research on questions about college readiness, validation studies, technical assistance for colleges and universities interested in doing their own validation. And we've indicated here there's been an interest in a research or data center for scholarship for the Common Core state standards. Although the scholarship would not directly support the immediate goal for implementation, it could shed some light on the challenges that have impeded the smooth implementation in order to inform and encourage the improvement. So, what does all of this mean? What are the opportunities of the partnership as identified as the areas of interest for state leaders? Tried to give you just a few examples here, and I think you can probably infer already from the remarks that I've made. But here's some opportunities for partnership. The development of a model successful programs that build capacity at the state and local levels, such as Florida College, but leave flexibility for state leaders to tweak along the way to meet those individual and unique needs within the states. But there are more successful programs that can build capacities. The ability to aid states in the building and execution of cross-sector intervention systems are the tools that support them. One example is the statewide longitudinal data systems, including the data in terms of the user-friendly formats. But there are other types of cross-sector intervention systems that we can talk about. We want to support regional convenings, and this is, to me, a very a direct way of foundation to support. When states, we find, are having difficulty finding the resources to bring their post-secondary education community together, when we talk about some type of regional convenings, it's going to be virtually impossible without some support. And here is one reason, from our perspective of PARCC, that we see for supporting the regional convenings. Students are going to be applying for admission across state lines. Students in California, which is a Smarter Balanced state, are going to apply for admission to Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, which are PARCC states. So students in California are going to be taking the Smarter Balanced College Ready Assessment. But what does that mean? What is the comparability of that to the PARCC College Ready Assessment? We already have a joint committee for Smarter Balanced and PARCC to begin that discussion about comparability, but we need to bring together on a regional basis states, I think, that we can identify where there's a lot of migration of students across state lines, because there's some additional support, some additional types of outcomes that can be developed here to support not only the schools but also the students. Another area for partnership is supporting dual admission, concurrent enrollment opportunities, including the delivery of remediation in 12th grade. This is an area that I have been raising now with our higher education communities and K-12 communities in my year 3 of the Lumina grant. And that is what I would like to see happen is a lot of communication between our higher education and K-12 communities to expand significantly the dual admission or concurrent enrollment, but to actually offer remediation to students in the 12th grade before they enter or graduate from high school. There isn't any reason that I can find, and I've talked with the American Association of Community Colleges in Washington, D.C., and I've had several meetings with them. This is a real opportunity to expand learning opportunities by assessing students at the end of 11th grade at the PARCC assessment who need some additional support, and providing that support, including the offering of remediation in 12th grade. So when the student graduates from high school, they move directly into entry-level credit-bearing courses, not only at 4-year colleges, but also at 2-year colleges. Many students take the entire freshman year to enroll in remediation, anywhere from 1 to 4 courses or more. So this is an area that's going to need some support. There are the areas for partnership for acting as advocates for the Common Core and Common Assessments through communication. As I say, communication at this point in the development and implementation of the assessment is particularly crucial and key, especially to the communities, families, and to the students. And I use the word families deliberately instead of parents, because in this day and age, many of our communities of students, particularly those that are the first in their family to go to college, economically disadvantaged, educationally disadvantaged, may or may not have a parent. They may have an aunt or an uncle or a brother or a sister who acts as the support for that student. So we need to recognize that the communication needs to extend beyond what we frequently refer to as the traditional family, recognizing that there are other types of relationships between the student. Finally, using existing partnerships and programs, especially in the area of the development of developmental education as well as interventions reform, and to incorporate those in the Common Core state standards and the common assessments. What I've provided for you here in the last two slides is really talking about the key messages. The first, we've created connecting the dots. We did this last year, and we did this primarily at the request of the higher education community. They wanted to have a specific an opportunity to respond to those areas of interest that were specific to higher education in the community. Excuse me, my computer is acting up here. Okay, I'm back in business. Apologize for that little glitch. And then what we did was invite our our higher education leadership team members from our states to identify what some of those key messages should be. We refer to this as the elevator speech card. If you have like 5 minutes alone with a legislator or a member of the governor's staff or your own faculty or president, what can you say in a very quick minute that would be useful? Lastly, as I conclude here, this is very important. This is going to be released shortly. We put together higher education-focused messages that describe the key messages on the front. And you will see here that some of the key messages are talking about, to the variety of the communities, is what is it, how can K-12 and the post-secondary education community work together to build pathways for students? And you can find here that some of the key messages, again, that our community said were very, very important. So with that, I will conclude. The very last slide that you have here is just my contact information, ajones@achieve.org. We're available at this point, I think, in the program to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you very much.
Thank you, AJ. Yes, I'm hoping that we'll have, if there are any questions coming from the field at this point, and we'll give you a pause if you would like to type into the chat with presenter box or put in a question. Be happy to, or raise your hand. I wanted to say thank you both to AJ and Jackie. We are extraordinarily lucky to have both of them tending to this very, very important element of Common Core implementation. The assessment development work is devilishly complex, but at the same time incredibly aspirational. And then alongside of that is the call to bring a very, very complex set of constituencies in higher education to that table. And both of these individuals and their staffs have been working on this with alacrity and passion and nonstop energy, I might add, for months and months and months and months. So it's been wonderful to watch. So I'm not seeing a great many questions, but actually, AJ, I did have one question for you, and maybe I could refer it back to Jackie as well. If you had to think of the one thing, one or two top things that are challenging your work the most in states, what are those? What are the biggest barriers that you and your team are personally facing as you're trying to knit together these conversations, information flow, and action?
Okay, can you hear me? I'm not sure if can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for that question, Sherry. I think probably the top two that emerge, actually there's the top three, but first is the regional convenings, bringing together our higher education community from the various regions. And I had a chance to talk with Jackie last week in Arizona, and I floated the idea with her to go back to her constituent group. I think it's time as well that we find an opportunity to bring together the higher education communities, both from Park and Smarter Balanced States, to begin a dialogue. So I would like to see that. I see that as a real challenge, but that communication and convening, largely because, as you know, when states cut, higher education gets cut first, and actually is competing for funds in many of our states with other social services. So that's one. The area of teacher preparation, both in-service and pre-service, I see as a very high. And lastly is the support for high schools to develop, and in concert with higher education, to develop some interventions that will help support those students who need additional work in 12th grade to master the Common Core state standards and those content areas that lead to success in those entry-level credit-bearing courses.
Jackie, did you have a response to that? What you think are the things that you would like to, that are actually challenging you the most, and that what you think foundations could do in response?
Sure. So I guess I would say two things. One is communications. These are complex policy issues. You can't talk about them enough. Even when you think that you could not have been clearer, there will be misunderstandings and miscommunications. So the need for just nonstop communication and clarification is a challenge. I think the other thing that's a challenge is, quite frankly, to customize our approach to 21 different states, in our case 21 different governing states, that range from Delaware, that has 4 higher education institutions, to California. So figuring out a way to customize our work, and that's where I think foundations working with states to help them to address their particular needs could be so very valuable. I do think the regional approach is great. I agree with AJ about that. We've done that at Smarter Balanced. We did a series of regional meetings, and it was really, really helpful. It's very hard with the number of states that we work with to have a convening that brings together K-12 and higher ed, and that's small enough to have really good dialogue and discussion. And the regional approach really did seem to help us to be able to do that. So I do think that's a great option. But I think it's that issue of meeting customizing our approach to meet with the states where they are, and to help them advance based on where they are and their agenda. That's probably one of the biggest challenges.
So another question for the two of you. If you will have a lot of different on-the-ground interaction with policymakers, thought leaders, practitioners every day, every week, but you're also keeping your eyes up and both in all directions, basically, for reading the tea leaves about what's going on. And in the spirit of the first question we were asked at the beginning of this webinar, what is your current reading on the policy atmospherics around the Common Core State Standard implementation and assessment adoption? What is your current, I guess, both reading and prognostication about how things are going?
Well, to answer, I think within our park states, there's still a great commitment on the part of the chiefs of our 19 governing board states to continue to move forward. I think as we get closer to the fall of 14, the actual administration, and more is known, I alluded, I think, Sherry, to one, and that's the issue of the infrastructure, the ability of states to support the online assessment, although there are provisions to do this on a paper and pencil. But that will create certain challenges. I think, quite frankly, that what some states are starting to look at and anxious to find out is what is the cost of the assessment. Is it going to be more than what a state is currently paying or less than what a state is currently paying? And that will have certain implications, I think, depending upon the overall fiscal situation and strength of the state.
Okay, fair enough. Jackie, did you have any thoughts on what your feelings are about the current atmosphere and also what might happen in the near future?
So I do think I agree with Allison that there's some trepidation in the states right now about their ability to manage the technology. I think both the consortia have really tried to keep the technology requirements as lean as possible. to make them as doable as possible for states. But nonetheless, there's concerns about that. There's concerns about cost as well, and concerns about some of this, what we've talked about in terms of some of the outside political opposition. I am optimistic. This spring, Smarter Balanced is conducting its pilot. By the time we're done, we will have tested upwards of 150,000 students in something like 5,000 schools across the consortium. I think that'll really help because people, on the one hand, maybe it raises anxiety because it's real. You really sort of, okay, this is really happening. But I think the fact that people will have interacted with the technology, had kids interacting with assessment items, see that there are assessment items, there is something that looks like an assessment, it's happening, it's real, will be helpful. We will also be releasing next month some revised cost estimates. Our cost estimates, probably the same is true with Park, were in our grant proposal, so now they're several years old, so we're updating those. I think when people see that and see that now that we're deep into the development process, that we can provide them with cost estimates that we have no expectation will look much different than what they saw in our grant application. I think that'll help. So I think there's some things as we move down the road of the development process that will provide some reassurance to people.
Mm-hmm. I think those are really great points. I might add that this issue of cost, I think the more information that can be gathered, both from the consortia and their projections, but also the context of cost of assessment, both its not just its uptake, but its maintenance and improvement over time, is considerable across the states, and we're hoping that there'll be a flow of research around that, the actual market of assessments and the cost to states, that will sort of break down some mythologies and actually get some sort of real data out there that has not been really considered before. Higher education, I think higher education needs to understand that K-12 assessment costs and standard adoption happens all the time and is very expensive. So it's one of the, in fact, state legislators also have to really understand that. And it's kind of an important sort of built-in feature of our education system that we don't interrogate very much. So it's all good. The more transparent, the better. I don't seem to have any additional questions at this point. I want to give Jackie and AJ any closing thoughts as we finish up, and then I'll provide a few myself before we turn this back over to GFE.
No, just really appreciate the interest of the philanthropic community. I'm thrilled to see folks participating in this webinar. We are happy at Smarter Balanced to assist in any way that we can with connecting our member states with the philanthropic community. I think, AJ and I both enumerated a lot of needs out there in the states, and if there's a way that we can assist in making those connections, then we're really happy to do that.
Anything? Final words? Fine.
Great.
What I'm gonna finish up with just a couple of additional thoughts, and then I'll throw it to Kimberlyn. Basically, we're hoping that this webinar has provided you with a lot of food for thought. You're all already engaged in Common Core investment. You've basically heard from the horse's mouth, so to speak, from the folks on the ground, some of the needs that they perceive in terms of funder community collaboration, not just your resources, but as they are suggesting, your time, your communication skills, your ability pulpit are very important to mobilize. And we're hoping that this gives you information that you can bring back to your colleagues, but also to your boards as arguments for and actions ahead in support of Common Core and assessment adoption. Hoping also that you saw some congruence with the way you're thinking about your grant-making priorities and strategies around Common Core and what has been discussed today, and feel validated in your decision to make investment in Common Core, because there is an incredible value add that the grant-making community can bring to this work, has been bringing to this work, will continue to bring to this work, and as our colleagues have suggested, Jackie and AJ have suggested, they need us and we need to be needed. So it's a very good match. Think hard about your convening power, in particular in the communications side of this, that's been an ongoing theme all through this webinar. Think hard about how that works and how that might actually become more powerful and robust in the region or the location or city that you're working in or prioritizing. And with that, those thoughts to consider, I'll turn this back over to our fearless leader, Kimberlyn. Thanks, Kimberlyn.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sherry, and to all of our speakers for a really great webinar today. We really appreciate your leadership. But before we sign off, I'd like to take a brief moment to mention some of GFE's future exciting programs. First, the RFP for our annual conference has been released, and submissions are due by 5 o'clock p.m. on March 15th. The conference is themed Philanthropy, Rising to the Challenge, Leading a Nation More at Risk, and it will be in Houston, Texas, October 16th through 18th. Second, GFE will offer 2 member briefings, the first of which is focused on early learning and improving outcomes for kids of color and ELLs in the first 8 years. That will occur May 6th through 8th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The second member briefing is focused on collective impact and strengthening the practice of cross-sector collaboration, and that will occur May 22nd through 24th at the Aspen Institute in Aspen, Colorado. Registration for both member briefings will be open in early March. And now for a few closing thoughts. First, as a reminder, the full webinar presentation will be available on GFE's website and/or via email. We will also follow up later today and provide you with an evaluation of today's program. The survey is short, so please do take 5 minutes to fill it out. Your comments really do help us improve our programs. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for participating, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Please stand by.